I'll go. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to a very special author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today we have a guest that I interviewed 2 years ago, making her return to the show. Now, for those who remember this guest, she is an American urban fantasy author, historian, freelancer, and content creator, writing a range of works that include flash fiction, inspirational books, full-length novels, and a published master's thesis on one of the Henrys of England. As a professional writer and fervent scholar, she has devoted more than a decade to studying, reading, writing, and breathing all things fiction. As a child, she discovered her passion for reading and storytelling, often leaving the library after maxing out the permitted number of books, only to return later in the week hungry for more. When she turned 18, she wrote her first novel, The Court of Duplicity, a soapy, Austenesque-inspired Georgian romp. Her contemporary influences are Neil Gaiman, V.E. Schwab, Jim Butcher, Benedict Jacka, and RPG games. She credits her father, an avid reader of fantasy and sci-fi, while fostering her passion for transporting audiences to dynamic secondary worlds filled with vivid characters inspired by mythology, religion, and supernatural lore. A macabre fantasy, Reap What You Sow, was published in and featured on the cover of Killer Nashville magazines in December of 2023. Author of her short pieces received first place at New York City's Midnight Flash Fiction Challenge, and she's been spotlighted on podcasts and YouTube shows, including World Improv, Tales from the Wandering Scribe, and the Star Chamber Show. She has been a panelist at conferences such as Killer Nashville and helmed a workshop at the Imaginarium Convention. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia with her husband and 2 children. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about not one, but 2 stories that our guest is very excited to share with us. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest, author P.L. Riven. P.L., welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I was so excited when you reached out to me.
Awesome, P.L. Well, it is so excited to have you back on the show. And you have a lot of stuff to share with our viewers and listeners. So before we get to the good news, would you like to share with our viewers what you've been up to since the last time you were on the show 2 years ago?
Oh my goodness. Okay, what have I not been up to? So the book that I was talking about then has been rewritten multiple times. Like 4. I was lucky to have a Hunger Games editor go through the entire manuscript with me, which was very, very cool. I have written like my biggest news. I have an agent now. She is phenomenal. We love her. Yay, Marissa, we love you. Marissa Corvisiero at Corvisiero Literary Agency. Super excited about that. I've also written a book that in 2 months, actually, from the very first word I typed to querying level where it is with my reader right now was exactly 2 months. So that was
wow.
Really, really fast. The funny thing about that was it was a gothic, speculative, kind of a fairy tale, and it's something I've never written. I never write anything like that. It just poured out of me. It's like my reader describes it as kind of like a purple prose, active voice, dark gothic horror. So I don't know, that's not even my genre, but it was a lot of fun to do. And I've been, been on a couple more panels, but it's mostly writing.
Absolutely. And viewers and listeners, this is going to be some really incredible news, because before we actually began the show, P.L. was telling me some incredible news of not one, but 2 of her books, which have huge surprises. So P.L., would you like to share with our viewers and listeners the surprise?
Okay, so I have two books. One is a contemporary fantasy. The shorthand for that one is Raven. And then my Gothic speculative fairy tale is shorthanded as Carnival. So those are the two that I'll be referring to. So Raven was the one that went through the Hunger Games editor. It had unagented, solicited requests from Big Five. Some big names. One started with an M, another one started with an H, so people can infer what they will of that. And I've also had film producers looking at that book for TV or possibly streaming. Raven has a lot of IP that is definitely a completely new world. Underworld with mythology and Grim Reapers, and it is Alice in Wonderland inspired. There's a sci-fi element of a time loop at the beginning in 1995 Chicago. So that is very, very fun and very exciting. And I have also had, since I've signed with my agent, not that she's pitched it yet, but I went to another pitch event and I have full requests from Big Five. One is my dream. It is the one that I am, fingers crossed, I've wanted the whole time to debut with, and they have asked for Raven. And another huge one that would be an absolute dream has asked for Carnival. So, things are moving.
Well, that's incredible to hear, PL. That is amazing. And that's a little teaser for your two books. What can you tell us about Carnival and Raven without spoiling too much?
Okay, so I told you a little bit about Raven. It's urban fantasy, contemporary fantasy. And we have time loops and clones and gentlemen bovine minotaurs. We have casinos. And it is a living girl that lands in the underworld that does not belong there. And it is the story of what she's going to do. And it is actually a standalone with serious potential. It leaves on a really interesting note, but it is satisfying. If it never moved forward, you would be able to infer, but it is underlying romance is definitely a B plot. So that's pretty cool. And then Carnival is very different. It is Gothic, literary inspired, very lush first person prose. And that one is about a wish granting carnival that a girl is invited to. And she is from 1875 alternate France.
Okay.
And everything is very French. It's all very provincial. She lives on the cliffs of what would be Brittany, France, and it's been inspired by the history of Brittany. And she is invited to a carnival. And once she gets to this carnival, a lot of her deep secrets come out that she has suppressed. And she must kill the man that she's in love with in order to escape.
Ooh, that is really good. That is incredible. And that kind of leads into the next set of questions, which is, from your bio, you've always been fascinated with creating new worlds, telling stories. Your father was a big influence in your writing. You began, truly going on the path of the writer from, it looks like, the age of 18. And with all the success early on at that point, what would you truly consider your aha moment when you realize you want to take your passion for writing and storytelling and build a career of it? Because also in your bio, you're also an historian as well.
Yeah. So I can actually pinpoint that moment pretty easily. I was in 6th grade and I started winning statewide competitions for my writing. Got recognized, something, I don't even remember. I have a diploma or a certificate somewhere for it. And my literary teacher came to me and said, you realize that being an author is a career. You can do this. And I had this aha moment because I had always wanted to do it. And then I wrote my first full novel at 16, finished it at 18. That was The Court of Duplicity. It was a Georgian romp, very early Bridgerton. I was like 250,000 words. I was so proud of myself. I thought a lot of words meant it was very good. Now I'm like now I'm looking for words. My prose is very, very tight. So it's interesting to compare the difference. But I knew I wanted to do it then, and kind of got deferred a little bit because I thought maybe I wanted to be a professor. And then, I had my kids. And one day I was sitting there with my daughter, who was only like 6 months at the time. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back and do this full time. I already had my master's degree, or I was getting my master's degree. And I knew that I wanted to incorporate what I learned, because I'm a student at heart, but I wanted to take it and create fun things, because I tell everybody I'm the worst reader. I'm so terrible. Like, it's bad. Like, I get bored so easily. So I've kind of developed this reputation among my readers and my betas and people that look at my stuff, and they call it bonkers. They say it is the most bonkers, crazy, innovative stuff. And I love to innovate, but a lot of that comes from the fact that I get very bored. So if I bored myself, I rewrite my scene, and then I don't bore myself anymore. And you keep iterating on that, and eventually you end up with something that's crazy.
Absolutely. And, that's probably the thing about us authors and writers, is that we are constantly thinking, we're constantly creating. It doesn't stop. Sometimes when I go to bed, I was like, okay, just don't think too much. Don't think, and there's a plot element that I could use in my book, or there's something I didn't add in my writing. I'll have to do it tomorrow. Or if you're like me, you wake up in the middle of the night and just open your computer and just start typing away just to get that out of your head.
Oh my
it
gosh.
just doesn't
Gabriel,
go away.
It is so bad. Like, I legit work all night. I sleep like 3 hours, like 3 to 4 hours is tops that I sleep. But most of my writing happens from 10 to 4 in the morning. That's when I'm not on mama duty, right? My kids are asleep, my husband is asleep, everybody, is out of the, so I'm like writing like a crazy person. But I do know those aha moments, because the few times I do go to sleep, I'm like, sit up and I'm like, no, I have to go write this. Because I don't know about you. I know there are a lot of us, though, that will grab our phone, make a text or a note to ourselves, and then the next morning it seemed like such a genius idea, and then we read it and we're like, I don't know what that is. That's insane. I'm sure it was great in the moment, but you don't know if it was like sleep deprivation or whether it was like genius that now you no longer understand. So I hate that feeling. So I just write whenever I can write all the time.
Absolutely. Or also you get like the recording thing, you record a text in an email and send it to yourself, and then you just take that, take that and add it to your story, and then
I like it.
Yeah. But it's just so crazy. And I also remember you used to post that on your social media of, your weekly writers sprints. Like, okay, it's like 10 at night, I'm going to be writing. And so I remember that. I remember seeing that. I was like, oh my gosh, this person is insane. But then this leads to another question, familiar question. So when you began writing Raven and, of course, Carnival, they are in your style of writing, but they're vastly different types of storytelling, if that makes sense. So when you went into these two respective projects, what were your individual goals for both, but also the promise you're making to not just readers of those particular genres, but your overall readership that you have gained and acquired over the years?
That's a great question. Okay, so Raven is very much in my wheelhouse. It is contemporary fantasy. I live there. I think you listed Jim Butcher, V. Schwab. I have signed books behind me. I adore them. They are fabulous. And that is exactly what I read. So I was very comfortable. I just wanted to make something that was really fun. And I loved the Alice in Wonderland. So I kind of ran with that. And really, I didn't have a really clear direction, which is why that one ended up being written 14 times, 14, 16. I've lost count. It was a lot, right? Now, Carnival, the funny thing about it is that I had already met Marissa. And I pitched Raven to her, and she loved it. She said, for sure, gimme, gimme, gimme. So I sent it to her, and I knew that I was going to be seeing her again because I had signed up proactively to talk to her again, and I couldn't pitch the same book. So I knew I had to have something brand new for her. So I had 2 months to put together a brand new book with a totally different feel, that if Raven didn't work for her, that she would want Carnival. And I said to her, you know, Marissa, you're my girl. I am going to write and write and write until you have something you can offer on. So the best thing I could do was take what was really getting picked up a lot, right? So I went on Twitter, X, whatever, and I started reading descriptions of books that were being picked up by agents. What was being published, what was being picked up, anything that people would put like first pages or first chapters or whatever. I just devoured it. I'm like, okay, I need to write something not to market, because I don't believe writing to market, right? I don't believe the story should be written to market. I think you should write the story that wants to be told, but you can choose in what way you're going to present that story.
Absolutely.
So I did not want to write another contemporary fantasy. I wanted to write something that was Gothic. And the problem is I don't read that. The last time I read Gothic, I was reading Wuthering Heights. I was reading Frankenstein. I was reading Dracula, all of the classics. Oops, that was sorry, I made noise. So I didn't really know what was out there. I just knew that I wanted to write my version of it. And with Carnival, Frankenstein is a comp for sure. Night Circus is a comp. It's not Once Upon a Broken Heart. That was Raven. But I had a concept of what I wanted to do, and I knew that what I write always ends up being very unique and very my own, because I do pull so much from my background. And with me having a philosophy degree and a history degree, and I'm obsessed with religion, I knew that if I had a concept, I could just kind of let the story progress. And it turned out that Viviette just wrote the story for herself, because I wrote it in first person. I became Viviette. And then 2 months later, I had a book, and I've had it read by a lot of people at this point that have read both. And they come back to me, they say they are so different. They are completely different experiences, but they are both bonkers. So there's a consistency of the unexpected in both books, and twists and turns that are shocking yet inevitable, to quote writing excuses, because I still love writing excuses. I think I told you about it before.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a consistency there, but you don't know what genre you're going to get, but you are always going to get a story that is wrapped up in creativity. And I really try not to leave anybody hanging, because like I told you, I get bored. I also get very upset if I felt like I got cheated at the end. So I try very hard to make sure that I deliver on my promises.
Absolutely. And you touched on a few things, Kiel, that we'll be talking about later in the interview. One of which is, of course, writing to market, and whether or not that is the right strategy or the wrong strategy. And also something that you brought up that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is, of course, writing what you're afraid of, not in a sense that you're fearful of it, but it's out of your wheelhouse. I've only had one other guest mention that, and I think it is very fascinating and important to talk about, because as authors, we tend to get pigeonholed and boxed into our preferred styles of writing or preferred genres. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't stay in those categories. We should write what we're comfortable writing, but it shouldn't be, what's the word I'm thinking of? We should have the freedom to explore and test the waters in other genres to really see what else are we capable of writing, what other types of stories. And that leads into, of course, how other people are going to react. So when you began writing Raven and Carnival, as you mentioned, your agent had a chance to look at both. But what about friends and family? What was their reaction like when you showed them Raven and Carnival?
Okay, so this is funny. My husband is obsessed with Raven. He loves Raven. He he's written songs for Raven, right? I have like indie rock songs for my characters. He loves Raven. It is so up his alley, even though he doesn't read any fiction, which is funny. My mom, she is obsessed with Carnival. She loves Carnival. It just resonates with her, where urban fantasy is not her thing. My dad has read an old version of Raven. He's going to read the new one, I think, like in July. And he hasn't looked at Carnival, but he's heard about it. And he likes both, right? He sees the elements that he's drawn to, because he likes the quirk too. And they're both very quirky books. It's funny. I've had a couple people, I would ask them, like, which one are you more drawn to? And I'd get a comment of, oh my gosh, I love this about Raven. except I love this about Carnival. And it's just back and forth and back and forth. So to me, what that meant was that I was delivering on the same promise in a different way, right? So, I mean,
Right.
here's the promise. I'm coming at it one way. I'm coming at it the other way. So honestly, it was a relief to me that I was staying true to me and to what was expected of me. Otherwise, I feel like it would have been very clear cut. Like, this book is great. This book is not so great. And nobody ever said that. It was more of a personal preference. It was like insanely well written, really interesting, but I just resonate more with this particular character.
Absolutely. And that's probably the most beautiful thing about, writing in different genres, as well as establishing your voice over a series of books. You tend to get an idea of, how you approach storytelling, how you approach characters. And this leads into another question, is what I call a few reflective questions. I may have asked you this before in your first interview, so I'm curious to see if your answer is still the same or has changed
Me too.
in the last 2 years. So first and foremost, to add context to this question, as authors, whenever we work on a new book, whether it's our first book or a new book in the series or something completely different, it is our baby because we put a lot of hard work, time, and dedication into it. But especially now in the digital age for authors is a double-edged sword. Yes, we're able to reach out and connect with fellow authors, fellow readers, and really do research to figure out, okay, what books are trending, what are people enjoying, how can we caveat into that category. But on the other end, we do leave ourselves unfortunately exposed to hate speech, trolls, spam, negativity, and all that can be very detrimental to an author's mental health and overall well-being.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, PL, from your early stages in writing, from your first book to now, have you ever had those moments of heightened anxiety or imposter syndrome? Because it's always going to be there in the back of everyone's mind. I don't care what you say or who said it, it's always going to be there. And what has disciplined you to continue writing and developing your voice as an author over a series of different books?
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to grab there is my book is not my baby. None of them are. My books are not my babies. My characters are not my babies. Are there characters that I heart? Yes. I can't say his name, but he knows who he is, and he is very sardonic, and he is in Riven, and he knows he has my heart. But they are not my babies. They are independent people in my mind. They have their own likes. They have their own quirks. I write what they are, and I write to the character. I never try to put them in a box. So it does really help that I don't feel like they're my baby. So if someone attacks it, it's not going to affect me. Like, I don't care, right? Everybody has opinions. I mean, we have opinions about people. So why would we not have opinions about fictional people? That's my thing. Imposter syndrome is real. Imposter syndrome is constant. Imposter syndrome, I talked about this on another podcast. And so what I do, and I had gotten this advice, and I don't remember who to credit, but it was multiple people, I think. They said, start a file folder, right? And take all of your positive comments and drop them in so that when you start feeling lousy, hey, I can't write, hey, this is terrible, or, I can't identify with whatever, you sit down and you read those and you're like, wait a second, it's not that I'm terrible. And then you go back and look at it, and maybe I'm hitting a speed bump. Maybe it's good. Maybe I'm just, feel like, it isn't right now. You don't know, but that helps with imposter syndrome a lot. But also I'm not I'm very intrinsically motivated, and I'm very intrinsically, not even just motivated, but like, I don't need outside feedback. Like, I know when I'm on track, I know when I'm not on track, but it's not so much as that I know it in my head, I feel it, right? When I sit down and my fingers are moving faster than my brain, and I'm actually reading the words about a second behind what I've written, I know that I've tapped into what my husband calls the zeitgeist, right? So it's out there in the world. It's a living being. I've just captured it, and I've been lucky enough to put it on my page. And that's how I really describe it. I've been, anytime somebody trolls me, like, I usually ignore it for a while. When I start getting weird DMs, that's where I don't, identify. Like, I don't care. Like, you can say what you want, right? Like, it's everybody has an opinion. But I do think that it crosses the line when DMs get involved, particularly when unsolicited things are sent to you, right?
Right.
And so those people are blocked, and I usually there's a list of my girlfriends. I'm like, watch out for so and so, just so you know, this got weird. But I've been really, really lucky. I truly am. Everybody, I feel like the community that I've built around me and that I'm lucky enough to be a part of has been very, very supportive. And it's just kind of a love fest.
That's awesome. That's awesome, PL. And this is actually another question, a new question, which I've been asking my guests, and I want to hear your thoughts on it because I think you have some really great insight. And again, context for this question, a previous guest on my show, Jasmine Young, posted on her social media a few months ago saying that we are in a golden age of independent authors because the publishing industry has changed, in the last 20 years or so. There's a lot more independently published books.
Yeah.
And I myself agree with that. And she based her evidence on the COVID years, the lockdown era, that it pushed people to go outside their comfort zones. And that it resulted in new music, new artistry, content creation, and of course, books. And I've been asking my guests this question because I like to hear their thoughts. And the answers have been very divisive. Some say that we are in a golden age. Some say that we are in a renaissance of some kind. Some say that we're not in a golden age. And some have even gone further than that and said that they are not in a golden age because while there is an increase, an influx of new material, those were not created solely based upon passion or to push, the boundaries of the written word. They were just pushed there to exist. So, PL, in your opinion and your experience, do you believe now that we are in some kind of renaissance or we are on our path to entering a renaissance?
That's really an interesting question. I guess my initial knee jerk is we could be. I think there are people that are. I think there are people that are tapping into that zeitgeist. I think there are people that have hit their passion, that realized that they wanted to be authors or have been really driven, right, to write content and write books and really connect with people, particularly with book talks, right, and social media. Like that's really we found a community, I think, in many, many ways. I do think there is a cancer of sorts out there with the AI generation, right? And that's such a huge topic. Like, you could have like 5 podcasts on AI. I think that the people that are really driven and really have the passion and the burn in them, that it doesn't necessarily affect them. I feel like the people that thought that maybe they wanted to, it might be a cool thing to do. I think that might be being boistered a little bit with the AI. I do know a lot of people that kind of had it on their bucket list. I want to write a book and I want to have it published. And I think that's so beautiful because you can go on Amazon and you can publish the book that you want to publish. And if you sell it to your friends and you give it for Christmas presents and that's what they're looking for, that's fantastic. I think there's a lot of part-time authors out there, which I love too. Personally, like for me though, this is a career. I've wanted since I was a child. And I've taken a very long time. I'm no longer a child, right? I am 40 and I am just now hitting my stride. And in some ways there's so much reward behind that. Because from the outside, it might look like I've had like all these great successes, and I have, right? But they've kind of been smushed together and nobody really sees all the pain and the crying and the I want to give up, and where imposter syndrome probably was more than just imposter syndrome. It probably wasn't any good, right? Like, and you have to go through all of that, and you have to study and talk to people, and there's so much involved in that. And I think that's not just a renaissance. I think that's a passion, right? So to me, in a renaissance, it's everything is blooming, and it is blooming, but we're forgetting about all the dark ages that moved into the renaissance. So I still see it from both points of view. I think it really has to do with more of the individual and less about the group, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And again, you touched on a lot of great points, which is, of course, AI and writing and publishing and how a lot more books are being written with AI. I've actually was seeing an article where this author, I think it was a self-published author, where in their books it actually has this book was written in the style of so and so, and that was from an AI. You saw that too, right?
I saw that. Yeah, they left the prompt. They left the prompt and about some author that they copied. Yes, I remember seeing that. I don't know who it was. I do remember seeing the article though.
Oh man, I was like, that is a no. Now I will say, and I've said this a few times on the podcast, I have used an AI software not to write books. I will always write my books, but I have used a software to help with getting my outlines as well as developing characters. I find it to be a lot easier, and I can tweak it however I wanted the story to go, and that is perfectly fine. But I definitely think there has to be a balance, because AI should be used as a tool. It shouldn't be used in a way to, there's like this whole discussion of like a tool versus, a necessity, because AI is not necessarily a necessity for publishing, like to write a book. You can easily, as you said, PL, I mean, you punched out a book in 2 months. I mean, you had a clear idea, you had a goal, so it is possible. Granted, that may not be the same for everyone else, but that could be a whole discussion in of itself. But it also ties into this mentality of, do you want to be an author who just has a book out, or do you want to be an author that's going to be creating their brand, establishing their presence? That is a mentality in of itself. And that perfectly segues into my favorite segment of the interview process, which is the business side of being an author. So as a little icebreaker question, PL, let's talk about the query trenches. Let's talk about all of that. I've had a few authors talk about the hassle and the hustle and bustle and just the fight. So let's talk first about getting your agent and how that has led to the success with Carnival and Raven.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The trenches. Oh, the trenches, right? Those of us who were in the trenches a few months to years, right? Like that is a moment, right? That's certainly a place where we have either built each other up, or we have completely given up, right? There are a couple unicorns that I know. Some of my friends were in trenches for 2 weeks, but then some of them are still on sub, right? So, and then there are people that were in trenches for years, got an agent, and then had a big 5 offer in 2 months, or actually one of them I think was 3 weeks. I don't know this person, but I do know the story, right? So no two journeys are the same, blah 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 blah, right? All the stuff everybody says. The trenches are horrible. They are horrible. They are soul sucking and filled with tears and crying is tears, right? Like it just it's the rendering of garments. Oh my gosh, I'm no good. Oh, my book is no good. I think that pitch events are a godsend, right? I met Marissa at a pitch event, met her, did kind of like we're doing right here, and we just connected, right? And she loved the book and she loved me and I loved her, and it was an instant connection, which is fabulous. I do know a lot of people that have success with blind queries. And I guess that's where you make the connection later with the person. But the trenches are horrible. The trenches are not fun. I think it is imperative to survive them that you have to have enough confidence in yourself, not just outward, my friend's going to tell me I'm good, or you cannot depend on a network. You have to feel it in yourself, right? Because that is, as much as somebody can be there to hold you up, if your legs are not going to hold you yourself, right, and your knees are bending, eventually you're going to fall, right? So it is really super important that you go into the trenches feeling confident in the work and yourself, and know rejection is inevitable. It will happen to everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how good you are, you will be rejected a lot. And it is very much the arts, right? I mean, you think about artists, you think about actors and actresses. And I think I mentioned I was in acting for a minute, right? And modeling, all these things. Rejection is a rite of passage. And for me, I got to the point that I was like, you know what? Every rejection is just one step closer to my yes.
Yes, that is very true.
And I think it really does. It would help so much. I would always say, gosh, I wish I knew how many rejections. I don't care I'm getting rejections, but if I knew I was going to get 27 rejections and then my offer, it would make it easier. But you never know. You never know. So you have to find a way to survive it. And friends are imperative. But you also just have to really feel driven enough to be there and know that you might be there for 2 days. You might be there for 2 years. I know people that were in the trenches for over 10 years before they got their offer. And now they're like very traditionally published.
That is very, very true. And this leads into another discussion, which I haven't talked about a lot on the show. And it's the notion of gatekeeping in the traditional publishing world. And not a lot of people talk about it. I think it is important to talk about. And definitely, especially for first-time authors wanting to go down the road of traditional publishing, as you mentioned, BL, it is not easy. It is a void, to put in a sense. It's like a void that's going to exist. You're going to be trapped in there. You don't know how long you're going to be in there. And your book is probably going to be picked up. Sometimes it won't. But we also have to look at, from the publishers, the big fives, their point of view, because they are titans in the industry. They know what kind of books they want. They know what sells. So they have to be mindful of that. And I can understand that. But I had one person on the show present another mindset, which I would like to hear your thoughts on, which is, in history, there are events that are going to shape the human experience around certain individuals or on a much larger scale. And of course, that's going to lead into new books being created. And publishers want that. They want these books because it's happening currently. The events are playing out in real time. So they're trying to get all of these new authors, and there's no guarantee that these authors are going to be successful. They're going to make their money back. But the publishers realize if it's happening in real time, people are going to buy it. And then once that incident or that moment passes, they're no longer going to take in new voices. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay. Well, immediately it takes me back to an editor that I met at the Big Five. And I talked to her. It was Simon & Schuster, actually. And I asked her about agents, right? And I said, does the agent name matter? Does the agency name matter? How much do I need to hold out for the perfect person, right? And she says, here's the thing, is that we're looking for a great book. And this is not just from Simon & Schuster. This is from all of the Big Five that I've talked to. They are not looking for the perfect agent name, right? Is that going to help you if they've heard of your agent? Probably, but it's never going to be detrimental if they don't know. What they're looking for is a book that they love, a book that they know their readers are going to love, a book that makes them excited. And one of the worst, oh my gosh, one of the worst things talking about the trenches is I didn't connect with this book as much as I expected to. That is like the worst comment to hear. And what's very funny is that while I was in the trenches, I was like, but does it matter? Like, I have all these opportunities. I have all these people that want the book. Like, do you have to really have this great passion for it to be able to go and send it to Simon & Schuster, send it to Macmillan, right? These people that are asking for it. And now that I'm on the other side, and it sounds so hypocritical, and I hate that it does, but the truth is that in hindsight, you realize how imperative it is for your agent and subsequently your editor and your publisher to have a passion for that book, because it is hard for them too, right? They have to talk to their finance department. They have their marketing department. They have to have, there's a lot of pain involved for them, just like there's a lot of pain involved for you. And there's a big difference when you're talking to somebody and you're like, gosh, this is a great book, versus this is the most amazing book I've ever read. You have to read it. I love it so much. And you have so much passion for it that it sells itself, right? And I think of a car dealership, right? I always use this analogy. Hey, so you've gone to a car dealership. There's a difference between someone who's going to sell you on a car and a car that sells itself. Right. And I always feel like that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a book, a project that sells itself, that you don't have to go and convince anybody to want it. And those are the ones that are going to really, hit the ground high and be really successful. Now back to the idea of like events and people writing about events. I don't have a lot of experience about it, but all I know from what I've heard is that they're not really looking for that, right? I mean, they want one person or two maybe to talk about it, but it gets old very, very fast. The first thing I heard when I hit the trenches was, if you have a book about COVID, throw it away. Start over. Nobody wants a dystopic book. We all are miserable having been stuck in our houses wearing masks, and nobody wants to relive that right now. What we're looking for is humor, fun, and bonkersness, which, thank God, that is exactly what Raven delivers on, right? Like, it is all fun. So if anything, I would say in my experience, whatever is the big event that's going on, write the opposite.
All right.
Because people are exhausted of hearing about it, even if it's a great event. Like, if everything's sunshine, rainbows, and kitty cats, how much of that can you take before you're like, I kind of want something dark and moody. Give me something, gritty, and vice versa. So if anything, anybody ever asked advice on, what direction they would write a book, or like, I have these two books, one's a happy, one's a dark one. Look at the atmosphere. Read the room. What are other people publishing? Because sometimes you don't want to publish what other people are publishing. And also, when you get to the publishing houses, remember what they're publishing right now was popular 2 years ago.
Yes, that is very, very true. Because you're absolutely right, PL. And I think that's the thing that people don't really take into consideration, is that the trends that are happening now, they may be popular at the moment, but they're going to sell down the road, like 2 years later. And sometimes it's not a very good thing to do, especially if you want to get into this industry. You shouldn't write for the trends, because it's not going to be your most authentic work. And speaking of this idea of being true to oneself, let's talk about this discussion, which I've noticed in my audience, which is it better to market or write to a general audience or a specific readership? And I'm going to break down readership in some of the four categories that I've seen across the authors that I've interviewed thus far. Middle grade, young adult, new adult, and adult fiction. And each of those four reader groups have their own set of rules and expectations for authors who want to write in those preferred readerships. So for you, PL, this is a two-part question. First part, for your books, what categories or readerships do they fall under?
Okay, start with that one. Okay, so Raven, I wrote, Raven I wrote as young adult, new adult, and adult. It started as adult. It went to young adult because I had a young adult request. Then it went to new adult when it went through a Hunger Games editor. Then it went to adult. Then it was back at new adult, and now it's at adult, right? So part of I was talking about how many times I've rewritten it. Part of it's because I was changing the age group. And it's like you were saying, when you change the age group, there are different expectations, but there's a lot of crossover too, right? What was shocking to me is I was actually on a phone call with a VP at one of the big fives, right? She was a VP of acquiring. She was over the acquiring editors, right? So she knew what she was talking about. She was talking about YA, and she says, you would be shocked if you knew what they put in YA books.
Yes.
You would be shocked if you knew what they put in middle grade books. And I'm like, well, I would like to know, because I have young children, right? My son is 12, my daughter is 10. What kind of content are they putting in these books, right? So maybe we'll stick with the classics. So while there are tropes and expectations, for me, I find that it's less about what the book is about and more about how it's approached, right? So young adult, you're going to have a lot of pronouns, right? A lot of dialogue tags, because it's hard for them to keep track, right? You read a very gritty urban fantasy, which is what I love to read. And there are almost no dialogue tags, because they expect you, even if there are 4 people in the room, for you to be able to go, oh, this person used, a key word. I know who this is, right? So there's a very different approach at the crafting level. Less about the content, more about the way that it's delivered. So it was totally possible for me to rewrite Raven. I didn't change any of the content. I mean, Alabaster, he takes a drug and he has to have you know what, right?
Right.
To as a result, because I mean, magic has a cost. His cost was that he had to go and be lustful. I didn't change that for my YA audience. I changed the way that it was approached, right? I changed the direction, because it was never explicit. Raven is very much everything's behind closed doors. Carnival is nothing gratuitous, but it is definitely spice, right? I mean, it's a medium spice. That's a different book. But I would never ever call Carnival a YA book. Ever. Like as a mom, I could not put that on the shelf as a YA book with the content that is in there. Now, new adult, that's a totally different proposition. New adult is a real thing. It is going to, they keep saying that's going to have its own shelf in the bookstores. So, you got that kind of middle spot. But for me, I am very comfortable in the adult realm.
Absolutely. And I think, I love what you said. It's not so much, changing the wording, it's changing the approach to like a theme or a topic in a story. What I think a lot of authors, should really, approach their stories if they are going to touch on things that may be explicit or maybe very mature in nature. And this also comes to the second part, which is with that in mind, who are we going to market toward? Are we going to market toward a general audience, or are we going to market to specific readership? So the second part, PL, do you have a good idea of your reader, your audience, and did you market towards the general audience or your specific readership over the series of the numerous books that you've written?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so the truth, I wrote what wanted to be written, the way it wanted to be written. For my characters, I never have written to market. I don't believe in writing to market. I think it is a huge trap. I think people that write to market, even if they have success, that they would have more success if they wrote what was inside of them and what the characters wanted. So I am a huge proponent for don't do that, right? Because unless you're a marketer and you have a crystal ball too, and you're in the publishing world, you don't know what the market is going to want in 2 years. You're not going to, you cannot chase a market. You have to either create a trend, which is very, very hard to do, or you write yourself and it becomes a trend, right? Because I would say that while I can put my stuff into an umbrella, right? The umbrella is speculative fiction. Speculative fiction covers everything. Sci-fi, fantasy, you name it. It's covered in speculative fiction, anything that might be speculated. So I can put my work in the umbrella and I'm very comfortable putting it there. But I'm very much cross-genre when you get into subgenres. You cannot put me in a box. So while that is wonderful, right? I mean, it's great because you can market it however you want. You go to a publisher, they say, hey, we haven't published a Gothic novel this time, so let's lean into this Gothic romance side of the book and we'll market it as such, and we'll be able to get you published that way, right? So that's fantastic when you can fit in multiple boxes. It is very hard when you're looking for an agent. Right? They are not looking for you to be cross-genre because the idea in their head, and I understand it completely, is that they think you don't know who you are. Everybody's cross-genre. Everybody's a little this, a little that. I write a little middle grade. I write a little adult. And you might be brilliant at it, but you have to understand that coming at the opposite direction, it looks like you are completely inconsistent and you're not ready.
Yes, that is very, very true. And this kind of goes into this other discussion, which is showcasing our individuality. Because I think it ties back to this overall question is, we may write in different genres, we may write different stories, but from, an agent's perspective or a publisher's perspective, it's like, who are you truly? And this is where we find this tightrope balancing act where on one side, we're showcasing our individuality because we want to do that. But on the other side, we have to understand, let's say if you're going in the realms of high epic fantasy, you have to understand, okay, people have an expectation when they think of high epic fantasy. You have to deliver. I know everyone says, write the book that you want to write, showcase everything. But there has to be a fine line where you want it to be original in the sense that you have told it, but it's still familiar to a general reader. Yeah. And if you switch it in one regard and it's too original and it's somewhere that no one's going to understand it, either the reader or the publisher, then you unfortunately lost in that regard. So for you, PL, how have you been able to balance and showcase your individuality through your writing, but also being mindful of the genres that you are writing into, as well as maybe take into account expectations people have for said genres and types of books?
Oh my goodness, I love this question so much, because I think it is so important, right? Okay. It is a situation where you want what you know, but you don't want to know that you want it, right? So you want something that feels cozy and comfortable. I know where it's going, but you also want to be surprised.
Yes.
And it is like the most impossible conundrum, right? To try to balance that.
Right.
Now, that was something I faced with Riven. It was so unique, right? I could not even find a comp to comp it. That was a problem. So what I ended up doing was I took the book that wanted to be written and I said, okay, great. What element can I add that is a very safe element that goes from point A to point Z, right? All the way across, so that I can point to and say, this is where it's cozy. This is where you're comfortable. And all of a sudden I started finding comp, like this is my comp because it goes this way, right? When Devin lands in the underworld, it is Alice in Wonderland for her, 100%. Now, at the beginning, it is not Alice in Wonderland. It is, the Truman Show. And I was able to write the book that wanted to be written, but box it in two different ways. So I have the in the underworld section and outside the underworld section. So I made both of them very cozy and comfortable in this realm, right? So my main plot, then my B plot, I always say C and D and E. I think they're all considered B plots, but in my mind, they're not, right? So I would give them in a place that was mundane, I gave you more uniqueness. Right. So if it was too approachable, I was like, now I get to release my creativity. And so when I was in Chicago, it was very creative. It was very weird, all kinds of real weird quirks, right? Very cool, like setup that felt fresh, but did not feel like you had to learn the world, right? We all know, I think most people understand what Chicago's like. And if you don't understand Chicago, you understand another city that would be similar to Chicago.
Absolutely.
When I got to the underworld, I was like, okay, this is completely new, right? We all have the underworld, but underworld is different for everybody in every single story. None of it's consistent. So what I needed to do was find a mundane, approachable vibe for it. So what I did is I made it corporate. His job is he is a corporate Grim Reaper. He goes and gets coffee. He has one night stands. He has awkward relationships. Girls don't like him. People, he has fights with people, things that were like, no, this is like literally happened to me. I was standing at the coffee shop this morning, X, Y, and Z. Now it just happens to be an underworld coffee shop. Right. And, maybe it's a Minotaur that's taking you to go to the casino, but I made sure that there was grounding. Right. And a thing that was very approachable. So that was a way to say, you can be safe and comfortable here with me, but I'm also going to add some level of interest. And it was just a balance between mundane needed interest and then something that was interesting needed mundane to balance it back out. One of my very favorite things, and I know this is kind of off topic, but it kind of isn't, for new authors. I had gotten advice from, I have to think about who it was, but somebody had given me advice that knew what he was talking about, an editor. And he said, for new authors, particularly on debuts, it's the rule of three. The rule of three means that you ask 3 questions as quickly as you possibly can in the first chapter to set up reader trust, right? Because with a new author, we don't know that author, if they make a promise, that they're going to deliver. So it's very easy to put down a book when you're like, well, now I don't know, because if Stephen King writes a book and there is no ending, guess what? We've still read all that book because we all trust Stephen King and we're like, no, he's got a genius plan. If I missed it, that's my own problem, right? We trust him just because he is Stephen King. And for new authors, we don't have that. So the rule of 3 is ask 3 questions, ask 2 questions and answer them immediately. In Carnival, I ask 2 questions and the one sentence has a question, and then the beginning of the next sentence answers it, and then I answer another question, right? right after it. So it's like within 3 sentences, I have a question, answer, question, answer. Then you get to leave that third question unanswered. Right. So now you're not just promising that you're going to answer the questions, but you're also promising that you are not going to give all the answers right away. And it is so great for hooking. As soon as I changed that in my books, I started getting full requests. I started getting people writing to me, like beta readers going, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. I love it. They were no longer confused, right? So you can be outside the norm, but if you are grounding people in the world, but also grounding them that you know what you're doing, that you know your craft. And that goes back to the whole Renaissance idea, right? I mean, you'll have somebody who will write something that will be brilliant, but they might not know why it's brilliant. If you don't have the knowledge of the crafting underneath it to be able to point out that normally I would do this or normally I would not do this and have a reason for it, then it's very hard to recreate it. And it's very hard to carry that from the beginning of a book to the end of the book. So I always say the first thing that somebody says to me that they want to write a book is you need to be studying like a lot. Listen to podcasts, read, and not just read other people's books, because you might understand instinctively what they've done, but you don't know why. You have to be able to point at this and say, this is a case of the rule of 3. Oh, this is a case of X, Y, or Z. And it makes all the difference. Like that is really what I was doing from the time that I was in 6th grade, where I wanted to be an author, to the time that I started really getting serious about Raven a couple years ago. And it was studying. And a lot of people don't want to do that. But at the end of the day, if you're an author, a real like working author, you have to put in the studying just the same as a doctor would do, right? I mean, you have to know that stuff inside and out. And when you can sit down, I mean, you and I could probably talk about craft and like nerd out for like hours and completely get it, right? And that's when you know that you've got it. And once you've got it, then you just have to have the idea. And it's like execution at that point.
Absolutely, PL. And again, you've probably given some of the best advice on the show thus far. I mean, your insight, you're welcome. Your insight is so incredible. And we actually are now arriving towards the very end. So I'm going to combine the last few questions into a 3-part question. So we'll start with the first.
I'll try to keep up.
No problem. So we'll start with the first part. And the first part is something that I like to ask my guests this question, which is, as we talked about just now, all books or all authors, we want to make something that's unique and we want to make something incredible. We also have to be realistic in the sense that we don't want to make it too unique or too out there that's going to lose people. And this leads to something that I have believed for a long time, which is writers are liars, cheaters, and thieves. We steal from everybody else. We cheat people out of time and we make stuff up. And another thing which is important is the same story has been told numerous times over and over, just with a little flair here and there. But what I have now realized for me going into my 4th book, I like to follow the 3 E's: educate, entertain, and enlighten. Entertain is probably the first thing. No matter what genre you're writing in the fiction world, you want to have your readers be entertained. You can educate them on, let's say, a certain topic or a theme that you think is important, as well as enlighten. You want something that they're going to take away from your book. Like in the case of Lord of the Rings, people are always going to use Lord of the Rings as an example of enlightenment or education in some regards, drawing from real world experiences, but implementing them in a fantasy setting that makes sense. So for you, PL, what do the 3 E's mean to you?
Okay, so the first one was entertain, right?
Yes, entertain.
Okay, so for me, you have to entertain no matter what you're doing. I don't care if it's an autobiography. I don't care if it's the history of turtles. I don't care if it's fantasy, right? Like you need to entertain me, because if I'm reading the history of turtles, there are 2 reasons I'm reading it. Either I'm forced to read it for school, so please make it fun and memorable for me in some way, and I do have a motivation for reading it. Or 2, because I really like turtles, right? I have a passion for turtles. So if you're giving me a book about turtles, I better believe you have a passion for turtles too, right? So entertain. If you feel passionate about what you're writing about, you're going to entertain, period. Like that, for me, that is very clear. Educate. right? I think that you can educate in a couple ways. You can educate in, hey, here's some history. You can educate Kate, and this is not the way that things happened in history. We have alt history, right? Also, you can educate, and we were talking about like reading other people. You
Right.
can learn craft from them. You don't have to educate in the world, right? Because world building is education, but you can also just educate in, oh, wow, that's a really creative, dialogue tag, or wow, like I learned so much about interiority in this moment, or immediacy in this moment. So, brilliant prose is brilliant prose. And I think no matter who you are, like you can learn from somebody who is a crafter and who has studied. And I'm really very much the person that believes every single person can teach you something.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It doesn't even matter like what it is. I think back, and I forgive you if you don't know this reference. Do you know I Love Lucy?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I Love Lucy. I can't say I grew up on it. I'm not that old, right? But I love Lucy. And there's an episode where Lucy has sent in a manuscript to a book, and she gets the offer. Do you know this story?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it as much, but I remember it. I remember the episode.
So she gets it, and she's all excited. They're going to publish her, right? Then they send her the book, and the book is in a chapter entitled, "Don't Let This Happen to You."
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I
And
remember
she's
that.
devastated. But then on the other side, it's like, but girl, you got published, right? You got a publishing credit. So even in the sense that it might be a misstep, you can learn from that misstep, and so can other people. So, read wide, read everybody, listen to everybody's podcast, listen to people you don't agree with, because at the end of the day, even if you don't agree with them, you can learn something, and you also might know even more reason why you disagree with them. And now you're gonna have to tell me the third E, because I don't remember.
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment. Ooh. Well, I have a history and a philosophy degree, so I believe in enlightenment. All right. Like, gosh, you can just, I guess it's in the sense, do you mean enlightened in the sense of a philosophical way? Exactly. How do you describe it?
For me, I almost think it's like an elevation of the educate, because for me in stories, like how I've approached, like, okay, case in point, I'll use one of my books, Michael. Michael is a high epic fantasy with an angel who pretty much loses his wings after he kills humanity because he causes the end of the world. And he goes on this whole hero's quest, and he learns about, what it is to be, forgiveness and overcoming depression. And there's some very heavy themes about potential suicide in Michael. But then enlightenment, I also bring a lot of philosophical elements. It's not very religious or preachy, but you don't have to be super religious to like understand the references, and you can apply it to, your own life. Going back to Lord of the Rings, I've seen a lot of videos of people using Aragon in video essays and studies of like, this is how we should be like Aragon, a fictional character, and apply his beliefs, who he is as a fictional character in our everyday lives, or try to be like him, if that makes sense.
So you're thinking thematically?
Thematically, yes.
Thematically. Or are you thinking as like role model? To me, those are different.
I guess probably if I had to be closer, I think like a role model, probably the best way.
Okay, so if a character is interesting, that character is going to have growth. Period. Right?
Right.
Unless we're talking about a neutral arc, which those exist, right? Let's not pretend that they don't exist. I'm looking at you, Sherlock, right? I mean, Sherlock is Sherlock. But of course, remember, Sherlock is not the protagonist, right? He is not the one telling the story. He is the one that it's about. He's the one we remember, but he is very flat. But we are learning from his flatness because we're seeing it through other people's eyes. How do they react to him? How does he handle people when he doesn't change and he doesn't grow? That forces other people to grow around him, right? And also as a reader, you're like, gosh, do I know somebody who is like that? Because they might be a sociopath, right? Like, so there's our enlightenment, like, stay clear of the real Sherlocks. They might be crazy. But as a role model too, I mean, a character that starts high and ends low, there's something to learn from that, right? I mean, hubris and, you're going to fall, right? That we have those things. Then someone who is low and gets high, it's, work hard and, believe in yourself, blah, blah, blah. Things can always get better. That's another theme. That's another role model. But I think the truest books are going to be characters that are not clear cut like Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings is very clear. It knows exactly what it's saying. And it's the measuring stick for a reason, right? I mean, an elf, I mean, we immediately think of Tolkien, right?
Yeah.
He does his elves. And then if they're not those elves, it's like, no, it's a different elf, right? Because that's like the epitome of an elf, right? That's what we think of. And I think at this point the industry has really grown past that. If you look at some of these old books, my goodness gracious, they would not get offers. They would not get agents anymore. We're filled with exposition. We're filled with telling, right? Like, we're not showing. Very slow moments where like the pacing just dies, right? And it's a very, very different industry. So if people are looking for role models, I think you're going to find a different type of role model in books that are contemporary versus, the classics. Because back then it was so idealized, right? Frodo, he's so idealized. He's, the Christ figure, right? You have the hero's journey literally comes from this. But my favorite are immorally gray people, right? So I mean, those are the true ones. And actually I say that it's contemporary. It's not actually contemporary. It actually goes all the way back to Greek mythology, right? You think about the gods, they were not perfect, right? They were not. Very, very human. And that's what made them elevated in the eyes of the Greeks, because they were not perfect. They, you could be like a Zeus, right? He's all powerful. That guy could not stay with one woman if he had to, right? So we were able to identify that you can be a hero, you can be a god, you can be powerful, but you can also have these faults and these flaws. And I think that's really what we see in contemporary works. And I think that's very similar to what you're talking about with Michael. I mean, you think about Michael, everyone has an idea of who Michael the angel is, and then it sounds like you just cut his knees out from under him or his wings, right? And then we get to experience not just an angelic rise to power or fall from power, more of like a human experience. And that's what I'm getting from your experience, like what you're saying about the book anyway.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, PL, you hit the nail on the head like perfectly, which kind of goes into the next question, which I think is also very important, is the discussion of networking as authors. Networking is a vital tool for authors. I don't care who says it, it is a vital thing. And it also varies in the sense of if you're going, well, actually, I don't think it does vary in the sense of you're going indie or traditional or even hybrid. I could see like for indie, it'll be a little more challenging because as an independent author, that's all out of your pocket. You have to find the editors, you have to find the cover artists, you have to find all that stuff. So it is out of pocket and it can be a little intimidating to do that. Whereas if you go with hybrid or traditional, there is some leeway where you do have a team of some kind that you can work and bounce off ideas. So with that in mind, PL, how important is it? And not actually, how important or rather necessary is it for authors to have networking and build their networking team?
Okay. So at baseline, I'm an introvert, right? I'm an introverted extrovert. Nobody thinks I'm an introvert. Everybody thinks I'm very extroverted, right? At baseline, I am. I'm not that way so much anymore because now my, PL Riven has merged with my real personality and my who I really am. And I'm kind of, this is me at this point. But this has happened over time. And back in the day, like I would not have wanted to talk to anybody. I would have been like hiding in the corner, right? But I wanted to be an author so much that I overcame that. I was like, you know, I can have pain and have what I want, or I can go in safety and hope that maybe I can, you know, like hermit it somehow and send it out and be a unicorn. So I started going to conferences, and everybody there is really nice. I've never really had a bad experience at a conference, and because most of those people are exactly in the same place you are. Find somebody who can help you, somebody who can mentor you. What I always tell my friends when they ask me about my journey with Raven, because my journey with Raven was quite costly. Very, very costly. I went through many, many editors, things that you would only do typically as an indie. But I was so convinced that that was my book that I did not want to write another book to try to improve it and be like, okay, well, that, you know, I'm going to shelve that book because I just believed in it so much. So I put a lot into that book, almost like I would have been if I had done indie. But the truth is about this is that while that was invaluable and every penny, like no regrets, the best things for me and the people that I've learned the most from are the people that give their time to me for free. Right? They are people that believe in you. So what I always tell people is find the person that is a couple steps ahead of you, but believes in you and your work and would never take any money from you, right? Because they can be a mentor. And I found that most of the writing industry, particularly when you start having a little bit of success, you want to give back to the people because you remember what it was like to struggle.
Yes.
Right. And you know, you never know unless you ask. I've DM'd people. I've had people DM me. And one of my besties, like, she literally reached out to me when she found out I signed up with Marissa, and she's like, asked me a very basic question, and I usually have a very basic answer back because, you know, you don't know who you're talking to. And she and I ended up connecting, and she's one of my very best friends, and you know who you are. If you're watching this, you know who you are. And that girl is going to be brilliant. She is absolutely going to be brilliant. I see so much of myself in her and my journey in her. And what I want so badly is for her to not fall into the pitfalls that I fell into. Querying too soon. I lost so many opportunities by doing that. But I didn't have a network to go to at that point. I didn't have somebody that was able to step in there and, you know, be a voice of reason and tell me the hard truths. So if you can find someone who is close to what you've been, you know, where you are, that was the first thing I would do. And secondarily, as far as like the artists and stuff, most people know somebody.
Yes.
Right? Because while we are a large community, we are also a very, very small community.
Yes, that is very true.
And like our community vets people, right? I mean, if you are fake or you are toxic, believe me, somebody's going to catch up, probably multiple somebodies, and you're going to get kicked out. You're going to be ousted. I'm sure you know of people. I'm sure we can compare lists, and I bet a bunch of people are the same people.
Absolutely, 100% PL. And you know, you've hit you've hit the nail on the head again for the second time in this three-part question, which we've now arrived at the final part. And this is probably the most important question. So context for this question, and it's kind of almost the same, which is, I've been doing this show now for about 6 to 7 years. I've had the opportunity to meet a wide range of authors. I think now with your episode, it will be like 136 authors out of 357 videos, which is insane. And I've learned a lot from these incredible people. And the one truth that I've come to realize is that in this industry, there is no guarantee your book's going to be a success. And also from that, there are two paths for authors: to be an author and to be known as an author. One is dedicated to the craft, the other is dedicated to the marketing. But they both lead to the same goal. But a lot of authors, especially first-time authors, are tempted and dragged into the industry via the second path, to be known as an author, which leads to a lot of unrealistic goals and expectations. Which, as I've said before, in this industry, there is no guarantee your book's going to be a financial success. Are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely. I'm sure you've met authors whose first works did launch their career, and that is a huge achievement in of itself, because that's not going to be the same for everybody else. So here is a question, or rather a scenario. Let's say you're hosting a workshop about the business side of being an author, And someone asked you this question, which is, how would you console a fellow author, an author who's just starting in the industry, who is feeling conflicted, frustrated, that their work is not going to be what they want to be, or they're not reaching the goals that they've aspired?
Oh my goodness. My mama heart feels for that. That is like so true, right? And okay. Was a very hard truth for me, so I will share this truth with you.
Okay.
One of my very good friends, this person also knows exactly who this person is if this person is watching, said to me, you realize that most people don't sell more than 10,000 books. Traditionally published, right? Traditionally published, successful people, right? I mean, 10,000 is kind of a threshold. And I think when this person told me that, I was like, wow, that's not what I was expecting. I was thinking, oh gosh, everybody sells 100,000, millions. That's what we're all aspiring to. But when you break it down, like, it totally makes sense, right? I mean, think about how many people buy books. I feel like while there are more readers than there were, I still don't feel like we have that many. And then you start breaking it into genre preferences, and now we're at a very small piece of people that are going to be diligently buying books. So it does make sense where that can happen. But that's not what you should be measuring your success by, right? You should be measuring your success by how many people reach out to you and tell you that your book meant something to them, how much your video meant something to them, how they learned something from you. Because at the end of the day, the work is great, but I feel like we really are just looking for a way to connect with people. Because I feel like so many times also as readers, right, we tend to be introverts. Right. We are looking for people that are like us. We're looking for our kind, right? I am the biggest freaking nerd that you will ever meet. And while I can hang, like I did cheerleading, I did all these things, I never felt like I belonged in that group. I belong in the reading group, right? So while you're sitting there measuring success by how much did I, make at this event, or did, how many people bought my book, or even, God forbid, like, what did they say on the reviews? Your success will come when you build an authentic group. You build yourself, you have to be authentic first. Then people are drawn to authenticity. They'll read your work and they'll love your work, and then you'll get a few, fans. And if you never hit it big like Martin, I mean, look at him. That man cannot even finish a series. Right? He can't even finish the series. Do we know who he is? Yes. Do we have opinions about him? I bet a lot of people have opinions about him.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we can't, even people that have their books made into movies, right? A lot of us, I mean, they think about these ones that are on streaming now. They're like, it's based off of a book. You know what? I've never heard of that person. Right? Now, does that make that person not successful? I don't know. Right? I mean, because I didn't read their book. I watched their show. And maybe I read their book later. There's a lot of measuring sticks to success at this point. Right. And intrinsic is the way to do this. That's what I was talking about with like the trenches. If you're going to be in the trenches, you have to want to be there through everything. And if you're going to be an author, you're going to have to be there through all the hard stuff and all the good stuff, because while there's a lot of good, and the good that comes is usually very, very good, most of it is negative. Yes. Right? And I don't care who you are or how much success you have, imposter syndrome does not go away. No. If you are authentic, if you are a true author in your heart and a writer, and this is what you're supposed to be doing, you are going to have imposter syndrome. I don't know this, so, don't quote me, but I suspect that that's true of any industry. Right? I'm sure that, my dad's a doctor. I'm sure there were times he's like, gosh, what if I'm not the best doctor? Oh, I should have done this, or maybe this person would have done it better or different. Like, it does not matter. Whatever you're going to throw yourself into, you're going to compare yourself to other people. Yes. And the business side, it is so easy to get caught up on this. All right. How much money did I make? How many followers do I have? How many people are standing at my signing, right? I mean, you think about people are like, oh, I went to King, right? He had a signing where no one showed up. Literally none. Nobody came. And what if he had said, gosh, I'm no good, nobody came? Well, look at the business that he would have missed out on. So it is not, while there are little bursts of sprint, right? It is very, very a long-term process. And that is the most important thing, I think, for somebody that wants to get into it and be ready, whether you're going to be indie published, traditionally published. Like, it is not going to happen overnight. And if it does look like it happened overnight, you didn't see the behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Probably like that's probably the most in-depth answer I've gotten to this question, PL, and it is a perfect ending to this incredible author's interview here on the show for the month of May. Thank everyone for joining us for another amazing author interview. A huge thank you to my friend PL for coming back on the show. And PL, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out? And would you like to showcase when your books are going to be out? Unless they're already out now, where can people buy them?
Okay, so I have a website. It is www.plriven.com that has some of my stuff that I've written, short stories, well, not short stories, flash fiction, a reference to my thesis. You know, you can see stuff there. Some of my news, places I've been. Primarily these days, I live on Instagram. And my Instagram is plriven, RIVEN_author. I am on Twitter. I used to be on there a lot, but now that I'm out of the trenches, I find like that place like drains my soul because it is there's so much about the trenches. I have my heart is bleeds for my friends that are there. So I try to support them and then get off of it. So really where I'm posting is on Instagram. That would be the number one place to find me.
Awesome. And your books, where can people go and buy copies of your books, as well as for Carnival and Raven? Are those already out now, or are they still in the pre-order world?
Oh my goodness. So I would love to be able to tell you where to buy my books. They are going to be going on sub. So I do not know where they're going to land yet. I do have some solicited requests, but no offers on those yet. So all my stuff is free. Anything you want to read that you would be able to read from me right now is on my website. Yeah, so I am just living that moment, that bridge, right, between getting an agent and actually going on sub and getting the offer. So when I know, then maybe I can come back and share.
Absolutely. I'll link all that down below in the description of this video. And if you want to see PL's first appearance on the show, I will make sure to tag it right here. And you will definitely see a change of viewers and interest. I was just starting out with author interviews 2 years ago, but it has been a huge growth for both of us. So again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for the month of May. A huge thank you to my friend PL for coming back on the show. We wish her the very best with Carnival and Raven, and huge congratulations for getting herself an agent. That is incredible, and getting out of the query trenches. That is awesome. Again, make sure to follow her on all of her social media platforms. And if you want to read her stories, check out her website down below. And speaking of which, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all new updates here on the Wandering Scribe channel. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you in June.